Welcome to Penny Bradley, Nacht Waffen Pilot Presents, and I have the honor of having my friend Eric Hecker back again. And today we're going to talk more about his research into some of the declassified projects that are on the CIA's list website.
How you doing today, Penny?
It's been raining a lot here, and my shoulder has been aching, and I'm actually up and awake and here.
There you go. Moving is always good.
Moving is always good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had a pretty interesting day so far. Went out for a drive just to get out of the house for a little bit because it's Alaska and it's gorgeous here, and it's very unfortunate that they think they can keep us inside. And I keep telling people as the sun comes out and it gets warmer, they're not going to be able to keep us inside. Everyone's going to go all over the place here. But we were out today and we're fortunate enough to see our first lynx in the wild. And that was really cool because we don't have cats here typically. You guys probably have them down by you. But
we have mountain lions, but not lynx.
Okay. But it's very uncommon for us to see them here. Is it common for you guys to be able to see them?
We have one coming here.
We have one that comes through the middle of the apartment complex at night.
No way.
I live near Yosemite, and during our drought that was, about 5-6 years ago, that because there's a creek that runs alongside the apartment complex and then down, and eventually it joins into the Stanislaus River.
Nice.
But because there was water running in it, a lot of the wildlife was making an appearance. And now with most people are in, wildlife is making a reappearance. So this, where I live, it's Central California and people think it's all civilized, but my area, we have bears and brown bears, and we have mountain lions, and we have deer. They're a lot smaller than they are, say, in Minnesota, but we still have them. And they're dangerous as hell. A deer can kill a dog with its hooves. And so don't go getting all Bambi on me. These are dangerous critters. We also have rattlesnakes and scorpions and tarantulas. So this is an area where you are armed because there is wildlife that you have to defend yourself from.
Same here. Yep.
So
yeah,
I'm a staunch Second Amendment supporter because this is the life I have lived. Is there's critters that you need to defend yourself from. No, I'm not going out hunting them, but I'm making sure they don't get me.
Fair enough. Hey, I would say you're 100% within your rights. Yeah, you wouldn't catch me giving you flack.
Well, I'm explaining myself for some of the audience who lives in a big city and only thinks guns are dangerous.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
It depends on your background, what you think of them.
Well, I mean, Alaska's the same way as you are. I mean, if we're going to go for a hike, you need to bring something. It would just be silly not to. You're putting your life in your own hands at that point, so you might as well not be barehanded.
Exactly. So.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a lot of people in the world who are afraid of guns, and if you're afraid of them, you shouldn't have them. They're just a tool.
Train the fear out. I mean,
they're just a tool like anything else.
Yep. A lot of people are scared to drive a car until they learn how to do it safely.
Exactly.
But I was hoping to chat with you today about some of the stuff that I have come across, because I gather that you have come across things similarly. So I was hoping to maybe bounce some of my information off of your head and vice versa, and see if we can't just help grow the information for the community, I guess. And as of recently, I have been digging deeply into what's commonly known as the Stargate program through the CIA website and the Freedom of Information Act stuff, which is fantastic and diggable. It is searchable.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge, but it is doable. But what I'm finding is that the programs definitively change names. Maybe let's just say,
Absolutely.
say maybe almost every decade, there's going to be a solid name change on who the program is operating under and who's funding it. Sometimes multiple different directions of funding. All of this stuff, I have a solid paper trail for. But the other thing that it makes me wonder is that just because I have a paper trail for it, that doesn't mean that there's not other paper trails, other revenue streams, other programs. I mean, I'm literally just following a line. So I was curious what your angle would be on stuff like this.
When I was checking out the umbrella we call Stargate, okay, for the audience, Stargate is the remote viewing project. It was where the CIA decided to listen to Ingo.
Just one. All paperwork.
And there were several folks involved that were all his level. Most of them are still not public. But Ingo Swann did a book, I believe it's called Penetration. And it was about how to go about remote viewing. And over time, they found out that most people can remote view, they just have it in their heads that they can't.
Right.
That we all kind of have this capability. Some of us are more talented at it than others. And so what the CIA did was they started looking for the people who had the talent so that they could do things like check out the Russian bases, or they would now be checking out the Chinese. And it was one of the things that they wanted me to learn when I was at Langley.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talented at regular remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at splitting into, I have what's basically bilocation.
Mm-hmm.
I am here in the body and aware, but I have separated a part of my consciousness and it literally goes and looks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm visiting the place is where I get my information. So the people that were in the programs in space, I'd say 80% of us or more are capable of this bilocation. And when we do information at a distance, it's reliable. It's one of the skills that you are expected to have.
Yep.
When you're on a ship or put on a planet in a warfare situation. At least in Nacht Waffen and what I remember of Kruger, both of those you are expected to be able to remote view or bilocate, one of the two.
The remote viewing and the bilocation were both things that I recalled myself personally from the Monroe Institute Talent and Gifted program in my grammar school. But more so, I say...
You had that in your grammar school?
Yes, ma'am.
my God.
Yep. So what I was going to say was that I remember those terms. But a
Okay.
lot of the other stuff I'm still trying to, I guess, come to terms with, because you're familiar with these programs. So my familiarity comes from first experiencing it directly as a child, and from that perspective, I assure you it made no sense. It's only
Yeah, I understand that because my
because it makes no
memories.
sense. They're not explaining to you what they're doing.
No, they're not.
Asking you questions that from the perspective of a child, it makes zero sense when somebody says to you the numbers of a coordinate
Mm-hmm.
and then says, does that make you think of water or not? Does that make you think of mountains or not? And then they assure you, well, it doesn't matter what your answer is. There's no answer that you can give that is wrong. So as an intelligent child, I was sitting there going, what is this lunatic lady talking about? This makes zero sense. So I would go to the library regularly.
I'm sorry.
Right? But you see what I'm saying here?
They
Right?
used to pull me out of school once, sometimes twice a year, pull me into the principal's office with 5 or 6 other kids, and
Mhm.
the principal wouldn't be in there. He would be booted from his office for the duration. And
Mhm.
so maybe for a week we would be given these tests, and that was part of what we did
Right.
was those things. And it was, they just I would go home and say, well, they pulled me into the principal's office. For what? What did you do? Nothing that I know of. And they, my dad, oh God, he would be livid, and he would call the school and, what the hell are you putting Penny in? And it
Mhm.
was, well, these are special IQ tests.
Mhm.
And, you know, they would mention national security, which in the 60s, that was a really big deal.
Mhm.
And yeah, and they would ask me weird questions about, what did I know about Mars?
Yeah, all kinds of stuff that's like, it's coming back to me now because now hearing all these other folks talk, now having an adult mind and hearing the potential of what was going on that wasn't being presented to me, it makes it click from my previous perspective what the heck was going on.
Oh yeah, that would.
You know? It's like, oh, now there's like this light at the end of the tunnel that makes sense of, because for me, we would go to the library almost weekly, I think, if
Mhm.
not twice a week. We would get pulled out of the regular classrooms and we would, we'd be running. They would, you know the drill. They fill your head, you guys are the smartest kids and blah, blah, blah. And the
Yeah, I do
program.
know the drill.
So we're running,
I was,
we'd be, and we're just kids. So you'd running down the hallway and we're like high-fiving each other because we think like we're just getting out of class. I was a little derelict, so I didn't really give a darn. I'm like, I'm getting out of class. We're going to go to the crazy library right now where they had very pretty, like 20 some odd year old girls that would sit at the table by yourself with the girl, and they would proceed to go through these questions, and they had headphones, and they would do all the Monroe Institute stuff, but like it was so obviously a program, and they would, the girl is very comforting and assuring, and everything you do is okay and there's nothing to be nervous about, there's no wrong answers. And it was just like, it seemed like Bizarro World to me. It was like, it seemed ridiculous. It was
yeah,
like, I don't know what these people are up to. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish in the slightest. But I'm going to play along because it gets me out of class. Go ahead, ask me a question. What color car you see? I see a red car.
did you make it up?
No, I would think about it. But it was just like, if we're not going to argue about this stuff and I'm right, okay, I'll play your game. I mean, whatever. Ask me questions and we'll do it. Let's play the game. And she would write the stuff down and we would do the assessments and they would always bring me back. So apparently I was good at it because they never made me not come back. At the time, I couldn't make sense of it. So it seemed ridiculous to me. Like now as a tradesman, I feel like everything I do, I should be able to see the fruits of my labor. I guess I have that logic. So to me, room lacked that logic. It was just like, it seemed like a waste of my time.
Well,
It showed no fruit to me.
maybe it did to them.
Oh, totally. I get that now, you know.
So yeah, um, this was about what decade?
This would have been the 80s.
The 80s. Okay.
Yeah, straight up when everything was going down, 83, 84. This is the really, really, really interesting thing and why I enjoy talking to you about this stuff. Because you know way more about family names and bloodlines and how that stuff matters, and I don't.
Okay.
So now,
Well,
you're going to
when I
love this.
started getting into it
Mm-hmm.
and did my family tree,
Mm-hmm.
and various secret agencies decided to contact me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a couple of them pulled national security on me.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the guys, he said, "You're descended from so-and-so and so-and-so, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah." But my family tree had been on Ancestry. It was public, so it's not like I've made an effort to hide it. And he says, "Well, we know what bloodline you are. You're an MER." And I go, "Mermaid?" And they go, "No, Merovingian."
Frenchier. Yeah.
Merovingian, yeah,
Yep.
Frenchier.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy tells me what bloodline he's from.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the letters MOR. And so there are different bloodlines, and the different bloodlines are in competition for who's going to rule the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that were chosen for space are almost exclusively MER.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a shock to me, that they would have one bloodline so tracked. Okay, they have their direct line who are in these groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of us, the ones that became peasants because only the air mattered, but the rest of us still have that genetics, and we're the ones that they took into space. So they've been hunting us down all these years.
So I found doing my Stargate research that in the 1983, 84, 85 period that I would suggest things got very weird out on Long Island, where I was living and technically in the program, that you can find in the paperwork, and you know how to go to the site and do the searches,
Mm-hmm.
put my last name in there. And watch how many other people with my same surname are working those same programs. You have literally the head of Los Alamos National Labs, Hecker, the head of SRI, Hecker, the lead field agent doing the interrogative work for SRI on the East Coast, Hecker. I mean, it's all in the paperwork. I mean, that's the stuff that's blowing my mind right now, because there were points in time where I could say, you know, what are the odds that I'm involved with this? It's increasing by the day. Like every time I go on that site and I click the, you know, the search button, it's like, you've got to be kidding me, what's in here? And it's been declassified for quite a bit. And this is what always amazes me, because everybody always says that, you know, if this is true, we would know about it.
If this was true, they would never tell anybody about it.
Well,
I've been surprised by how much they've declassified.
well, that's what I'm getting at, is that to me, I don't think this stuff has really been that hidden for a very long time for anybody that wanted to do due diligence. It's been kind of just below the surface for anyone that wanted to just, you know, wipe away a little bit of the dust. They didn't really do a good job of hiding these programs when they would run away from them. There was a lot of human error.
There was a lot of human error, and there was a lot of sheer arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were so good at what they were doing that it didn't matter who saw it,
Mm-hmm.
that no one would believe it anyway.
I
Now, the biggest fly in their ointment was the Church Commission in 1975,
mm-hmm.
which went after the CIA abuses in the MK umbrella projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that all of the projects that were continued simply went name change and maybe a change of payee.
I agree with that.
I know for certain that the project I was a part of is ongoing because I'm still seeing people. I'm still being contacted by people who were a part of it. And I'm in my 60s and I was first generation. And I'm being contacted by people in their teens and 20s. So it's ongoing.
Yeah.
I
I've come to learn what that little prod is. It's like a little, almost like, you looking for work?
Yeah, I'm kind of at that point of somewhere along the way they think I'm looking for work.
Yes, that's the way I look at it. And it's like, you know, next thing you know, you'll meet someone and you get this little weird conversation going and you just like, I'm going to go. This conversation doesn't need to continue. You're getting weird really fast.
The last
I'm
one
learning
of
that a lot of folks, I'm sorry.
the last one of those that I got involved with, she identified herself as an NSA agent, but she had a DOD email. And she asked me to do something for national security, and I declined. But I was stupid enough to make contact.
Fair enough.
And their intention out of that was to kill me, which surprised me a little bit because it was the NSA who activated my memories.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was first activated, I mistakenly assumed it was just the CIA that was involved in these things. And
I've been in
done
a lot
enough.
of different organizations, and I can assure you there is not the unity in the ranks that any leader would ever hope for. So to say that the NSA did this and the NSA did that, you had separate people being individuals that happened to have a common employer.
Yeah. I've known about a half a dozen NSA agents who were all in the Russian translation program.
Mm-hmm.
And they were decent people.
Mm-hmm.
But this last bunch that has contacted me over the years since, because I was activated in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
but the ones that have contacted me the last year or two, they have been downright scary. And as far as I know, the CIA has stopped contacting me outside of when they pick me up for mission. So
You had said something just there about, I guess it was the foreign aspect triggered something in my mind that I had come across recently I thought you might find interesting. And it was what the CIA referred to in the paperwork as their mid-career course, they titled it. And I can see, I have a great paper trail on this one. Every year, they offered what they called the mid-career course. But what the mid-career course seems to be is a foreign exchange program for foreign agents. So it talks about students from other countries coming in to go to all the different CIA facilities throughout the country. And it's like, Oh, I mean, that must what we must always bring foreign nationals into our super top secret places.
That would be what we would call recruitment.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, they label it as the mid-career course if you want to go digging for that one, and you'll see all the different locations and all the different trainings and, you know, all the different personnel that come from different countries. You know, they'll say that there was, you know, 12 students from China in this class and, you know, 7 students from Russia in this class. And, you know, we went, you know, from DC to Long Island, and then we went to Texas, and then, you know, and then they have all the different feedback on what everybody thought of the mid-career course, you know.
Yeah.
Amazing paper trail now.
Yeah. Bean counters require a paper trail. And that's why some of the projects are special access projects, so that there's not a bean counter responsible for them.
Yep.
And those are the ones that go into space. Those are the ones that kidnap children.
That was actually one of the leads that I first figured out when I was a resident on Long Island, in the town. I'm sorry, not the town. In the county of Suffolk. Suffolk County, Long Island, has the Suffolk County Water Authority, and they are in charge of testing all of the domestic water production and distribution facilities in the county and producing a report every year to let everybody know the results of those tests. And I would collect these through the years, and I paid attention that way back when Camp Hero Water Authority was its own water district. And as just an amazing little piece of paper that I could get that they would deliver to me every year. And it caused me to notice when Camp Hero Water District was removed and absorbed. I also paid attention to the amount of people in the area versus the amount of potential gallons and all that fun stuff. So, long story short, the Camp Hero Water District, which had, like, you know, enough water for a very large metropolitan area, was servicing about 75 people, 75 meters technically. It had enough pumping capacity for about 20 million people. There were whole areas on Long Island that had millions of people that operated off of one pump and one tower. But Camp Hero, for 75 people, had a tower, 3 pumps, you know, just basically all kinds of equipment, more water than they needed for half of, you know, that fork.
That doesn't shock
And
me.
then I also found out that this is the funding part, this is where it gets interesting. And I'm guessing at this part, but I'm going to throw in a couple of towns just because I can't remember exactly which ones they were. But there was 2 different towns, let's say town of Babylon and town of Brookhaven. Both of those water districts claimed in their paperwork that they were independently also funding everything for Camp Hero. So simultaneously, they were both saying that not only does their budget...
So it's paid for it twice.
Correct. But who would think to look in those areas for double, you know, investigating the town of Babylon? Are they really going to look into whether or not there was actually money going to Camp Hero? Are they going to look to see if any other water districts are doing, you know, who's going to look into that stuff? Nobody.
You.
Yeah, because I do plumbing.
Okay. One of the things about Camp Hero is that the program there with the chair
Yes.
created a time bubble, and that there are timelines inside the bubble, that when the computer is ever shut down, that bubble will disappear. And from what I have understood from some of the folks that were in the 80s version, example, James Rink, is that they still have inside this bubble thousands of children in cages who are still being used in the chair to control our timeline.
There is, from last I left Long Island, I would say prior to South Pole, say 2009, definitively. There is a power line coming from the utility that goes into the Camp Hero property, goes into a shack into the ground. This is Freedom of Information Act again.
Okay.
Local residents have to know that they're not flipping the bill. So the local utility will confirm that yes, someone else is in fact paying for the 1 gigawatt of power going into that facility still.
That's probably enough to keep that bubble going.
A gigawatt should be a substantial amount of power going into Camp Hero still right now, but a lot of people don't know that as of 2009, I haven't looked again since.
Okay.
Last I looked, it was fully powered and had tons of water. So all the utilities were available, which was normally my method of searching Long Island. I would just look for excesses of power, excesses of water, and excesses of ability to move air. And then I would laugh at whatever sign was on the building because I know that's not what it really is.
Yeah.
You know?
When I was at Camp Hero, it was, I'm guessing 61, 62. And
That was when they didn't know how it was funded.
I was about 6, 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there about 6 months. And I was not in the time loop. They had not developed it yet.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there, everyone who went to space went through the chair first.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't know how it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And they were still trying to figure out what could be done with it. They knew it had come out of a ship and that it had been piloted by an extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know what its capabilities were with humans. And we were all enhanced to near ET capabilities. And that was further enhanced once we got with the Germans, because they gave us the option of black goo, and that triples your IQ.
Hmm.
And
I heard that before, that detail. That it tripled your IQ.
well, that's why so many are willing to use it, is because it triples your IQ. It gives you extreme mental clarity.
Mm-hmm.
It enhances your health.
Hmm.
You don't get sick. If you get injured, it repairs you. And you have access to a strength that normal humans don't have. But it's at the expense of your humanity. You lose your...
But they wouldn't tell you that part on the sales pitch.
No.
Correct?
Actually, they do tell you that you lose your compassion.
Really?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. If they, the infinite wisdom of the people running these programs, would they have this communication with the child? You're saying this was done to you as a child, this communication?
This communication, I was about 15.
You were 15. Do you, in your recollection, know of these programs having these communications with children younger? And if so, to what age would you say they might have this type of communication?
Since I didn't offer it to anyone myself, I don't know what age range they go down to. Because the Germans gave you the option. They didn't force it on you.
Understood. Mm-hmm.
I know that Monarch, one of the mercenary companies out there, all of their people are shot up with it. They're not given the option, and I'm pretty sure that they are doing this to children.
Okay.
So I'm also aware that when they send you back to Earth, that they take it out of your system. So there is an antidote.
Interesting. It's removable.
It's removable.
Excellent.
But when Max Spears was poisoned,
Mm-hmm.
it was something that the black goo in his system could not remove. And so when the goo realized he was dying, that's what he was throwing up. They said he threw up a gallon of black stuff. That's
Mm-hmm.
what he was throwing up, was the black goo in his system. And I have the utmost respect for Max Spears because he was under the influence of this AI and was still exposing the crimes being done by his faction.
Okay. I did watch a bunch of his stuff, and I guess it was a really long time ago. So I imagine probably a lot of what he said probably went over my head at the time. I don't think I was very versed.
Probably.
I came across him on the front end, and I think what he was saying to me at the time just seemed like Greek.
What he said, he mixed a lot of Roman Catholic theology into it.
That's not so Greek to me.
And I had trouble with the theology parts.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I didn't understand it, but to me, mixing your personal faith in with your testimony.
It's almost too easy for me, in my opinion. It's like a comfort zone. It's like when you're trying to explain things that you don't understand and they're outside of you, it's like just give them in their own right. Like don't try to make it blend to what you know. It's almost disrespectful to the unknown thing to try to force it to fit into your
Exactly.
time.
You undermine your testimony about your experience when you filter it through your religion.
I can understand that.
So I make an effort to describe it objectively.
It oftentimes shows somebody's bias or preference or comfort zone versus necessarily what might have actually occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And it's challenging. It's more challenging to take that type of testimony than somebody who can be more distinct.
Someone who can't tell the difference between their experiences and their religion is undermining both.
Yeah.
Now, I'll admit that some of my religious experiences have been very far out there, and I don't share them because I'm not sure I even believe them. They've been very real and sometimes overpowering and sometimes empowering and mostly overwhelming. And I just sort of flow with them. This happened here. This happened here. You know, I take that approach, put them in a box. Don't try to interpret it.
Yeah. I mean, because it's like spiritual experiences, religious experiences, it's an experience, right? So it's something. It's a mysterious experience. We could just title it that. It's something outside of your normal waking activities that you can rationalize or reason into the rest of the day. So it's just some mysterious experience, and this is where we need to all stop arguing about these things, right? Let's just agree that we'll have mysterious experiences and not argue about the difference in distinctive terms. And, I think it would accomplish more. So like these mysterious experiences, maybe these are the things that these programs were looking to target. People like you that would be more willing to discuss it, and then like they say biblically, you know, having ears to hear, that there would be people like already in the know at the listen, you know, oh, I hear someone talking about a mysterious experience. Here, come here, sit in the principal's office.
Yeah, definitely. I was the kind of kid, and I'm still the kind of adult that will talk about it under the right conditions. I've worked very hard to not speak of the religious experiences
Mm-hmm.
publicly, because in the ultimate theater of trying to stop the kidnapping that goes on in my program, that doesn't have a place in the attempts to stop the kidnapping, which is what motivated me with my testimony. Was
Mm-hmm.
I remembered being kidnapped. Okay, my program used rape and torture to mind fracture small children,
Mm-hmm.
and those are, if they're not capital offenses, they should be, and that needs to be stopped.
Totally understood. And that's a
And
question that
that
brought me back in here.
that's my big agenda, is getting this stuff stopped.
Mm-hmm.
I have come to understand in the last 6 months or so that those of us with psionic abilities, that the torture seems to activate them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had folks from these agencies tell me that if they want a telepath, if they want someone who can operate hyperspace, that they have to torture you enough for that ability to come up to the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of torture and trauma, which, I mean, I don't support it. I don't understand it either, but I'm not going to thumb my nose at the existence of it. Apparently, there's something to it. Maybe it's a shortcut to a different method of getting the same outcome, but some people are into shortcuts. I mean, I've met a lot of tradesmen that take shortcuts in their work, you know. But regardless, there's some work going on. You know, whether I believe it or not, these people are working in these things, so that's what's going on.
Yeah,
Said
I've
something.
had it explained to me, and I'm not going to expose by whom, but it was carefully explained to me that the techniques used by the CIA on me, they had gotten from the ancient and ongoing secret societies that are kind of under the umbrella term Illuminati.
Mhm.
That there are at least 30 of these groups, and that they have different motives, different bloodlines, different agendas.
Would this be what most folks refer to as like SRA groups?
That's part of the umbrella.
10-4? Okay, it's under the umbrella.
Okay, it's one of the 30.
Okay.
So they had learned their techniques from them as a way to bring out psionic abilities and to create altars so there was deniability.
Mhm.
So if you're doing all of this stuff to an altar that doesn't share memory with the core personality, then that altar cannot testify against you.
Right.
And so that was an important item for the folks who initiated these programs. So
Plausible deniability is one of the biggest goals of like so many governmental departments. I mean, that's like rule number one.
I watched your video where you were reading the permission slip.
Right? Isn't that so wordy-gurdy and so typical?
Yeah, well, I was listening to where you talked about you read off about mental health issues. They were referring to mind fracture. They were referring to any process that would activate the psionics. Psionics is a fancy science word for what most people call psychic abilities.
Yeah.
And they have been with us always because that's part of our genetic heritage.
Part of our hidden history.
And there have been groups throughout history who have tried to eliminate the part of the population who was talented at it. So those bloodlines have gone into hiding as much as they're capable of. But apparently someone knew who we were and have been hunting us down. So, yeah. And
ignorance is bliss, and we were all sleeping. And then, unfortunately, it's literally almost like turning a light on and watching the fireflies arrive.
oh my God. Yeah, and when I first went public, it was like all these fireflies, as you call them, appeared. I've got representatives from six different
Well,
of those
I'm looking
groups
at it.
that the ones they sent to talk to me are all decent people.
I was looking at it the other way, Penny. Like the program when like on Long Island, Montauk in particular, the light that I was referencing was the signal.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That literally, at the point that they figured out that this was out there, I mean, that was game on. Then they just started to have to figure out the process to look and find them. And that's in the paperwork trail. They go over this, learn there's a faction of society that has this skill set, and they learn how to find them.
Yeah.
On Long Island, they literally started cranking out a phone number.
Did they really?
Transmitting a phone number out, and when you would finally just call that number, I mean, bam, they got you. And that's in the paper.
When I was in junior high, so this would have been what, 68? Yeah, 1968. I had a school chum give me a phone number to call her. And it was supposed to be her home number. But when I called it, I got a man's voice saying, "How did you get this number?" But we lived about an hour away from Vandenberg Air Force Base during the Cold War. So, yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out now that the peculiar school that I went to, which was a private school, so I'm sure you're familiar with the funding of church and state, and it's not a public school; it's a Catholic school. So the thing that I found really odd was that this building was constructed, if I'm not mistaken, early 70s. I think the first classes they took in were in 75, which was my birth year. But this whole structure has labeled, and underneath there's tunnel systems and such, and it's labeled as a fallout shelter facility for the community.
Those were real popular in the 60s.
Yes, in public schools. When you're funding it.
No, that was popular even in the general society.
Okay,
because that was part of the fear porn of the day. Okay, now we're afraid of coronavirus. In those days, we were afraid that the Russians were going to nuke us.
Totally understood. I just found it odd because I've worked in all kinds of buildings all over Long Island. That was the only Catholic school that I've seen so fortified. I've seen public schools. I've seen all kinds of other installations from that time period. Very well fortified, like you're saying. I just hadn't seen private school because it just seemed odd to me to get such a government level of funding in such a private facility.
Maybe the Monroe Institute did that. That's
my curiosity is the discrepancy, because I totally get what you're saying. For the the time period, yes, that was rampant.
Oh, they taught us to
Yeah,
get into a kneeling position with our
yeah,
hands around our
mhm,
calves
yeah.
and tuck our head, basically kiss our ass goodbye, and then crawl under the desk in
Mhm.
case of a nuclear bomb.
I have the original books that they issued you guys. All the training manuals, I've seen them. All the how to survive, all the civil the CD, the civil
Civil
defense
Defense Corps.
Civil Defense Corp and all their literature that they were putting out, all that World War II stuff. My grandfather had all of that stuff. He, World War II vet and the, Depression era. They
Well, my grandfather
read
wasn't
that
a
stuff.
vet, but he was in charge of a local CDC group.
Yep. Mhm. Yeah, they'd be doing all their air warden drills and killing all the lights and, back in the
Yeah,
good old days when everybody wisely had victory gardens, but they already had gardens. They just changed the name to victory gardens.
they had gardens and they kept them afterwards. That was why so many cities zoned gardens out, was to take control of the food supply.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's been a long time coming. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, it's been a
kind of
way
sitting
long
it in the
time.
here and now. I know everyone's
And
arguing about this and that and what's going wrong. And I think the big mistake people make is trying to figure out, like, as if there's one thing going wrong. Like we're gonna
oh
sit,
no, there's
we're gonna we're
if
gonna
there's
whittle it all down to the one thing that's wrong. Because trust me, I know what's wrong. And if you would just listen to me and everyone would listen to me, I'll tell you what's wrong. And that's what everyone's doing. And it's
but
like,
it's about 100 things that are wrong
I
all
just
at
want to say,
once.
yeah, you're all right. Now stop arguing and fix all of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, it's the virus. Oh, it's 5G. Oh, it's the food supply. Yes, yes, yes.
But the virus is real.
Yeah, of course it is.
It's just the excuse for locking us in our house.
It's a wonderful excuse for that. I mean, it's as real as any other virus. Is it as deadly as every other virus? Yeah, the ones that aren't deadly. I mean, it's not really killing a lot of people. Should we all be locked in our house? I would say not. Is the virus real? Yes. Should I be locked in my house? No.
Exactly.
Yeah,
People like me who are older and have health conditions should probably be hiding from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I was before
Mhm.
the quarantine was declared,
I
because
wouldn't want to do anything to hinder your life. You should be able to do whatever you got to do, but there should be reciprocity.
I haven't said for anybody to have to stay home.
Right? Right?
My
That cracks me up.
doctor told me, you are one of the people that have a target from this bug. I
Mhm.
want you to go home
Mhm.
and make sure you have masks and gloves and wear them if you go out.
Yeah,
And I've obeyed.
I don't see you making those posts yelling at people to make sure they put masks on and what are you doing? Try to kill people.
No, but when I made the posts about that the bug was real,
Mhm.
I've been deeply and seriously hurt by the nastiness that has come forth from
Yeah.
people who had been my friends. Some
Unfortunately,
of them were people that I could talk to about the religious weirdness. And now I don't feel comfortable with that because they've informed me that I'm preaching fear porn and that I'm contributing to the takeover of our rights.
people
And
get singular in their fears.
mhm,
Said somebody, oh, they're taking over our rights. So that person, their biggest fear is losing their rights. So they will enter this communication with you with a very singular fear. And until your response to them alleviates their particular fear, they're really not going to register an alternative additional fear because all you're really doing at that point is stacking on another fear. You're like, hey,
well,
did you consider
actually,
this?
what I'm doing is breaking contact with them.
Oh, I
And
got you.
I'm not interacting with them at all until the situation is over. And if they continue to treat me poorly then I will unfriend them. My personal wall on Facebook is friends only. So if I stop talking to you, you know, it's preliminary to unfriending.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Forewarned.
I'm like a rattlesnake. I warn people.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's like, you are going into dangerous territory. Is this what you want to do?
I
And
always feel that you have a very good way of words and also a careful hand. So the way I look at it is, if somebody has pissed you off enough that they're out of your circle, I'm going to gather they probably overstepped that line a few times.
oh, I had a guy yesterday go through my friends list looking for French Canadians because of his own personal issue. And then every French Canadian he found on my wall, I had to give him a reason why I was friends with this person and how long I had been friends with them and why. And
Yeah.
by the fourth one he had dug up, it was like, F you, you're
Yeah.
gone.
I don't have much tolerance for people bringing me their fears. I kind of think of myself like a mirror. I'll just present it right. Like, you know, people say, don't you think about this? What do you, I think it sounds like you have a very serious concern on the topic and you should work on it immediately. You know,
Well,
most people just don't want to do the work themselves. So they're almost kind of pushing their problem on you. Did you ever
yeah,
see there's a gentleman by the name of John Rappaport who did a
I
very,
know him.
oh, he's a genius of a man. I love that guy.
Yes.
He is such a wordsmith, and he's got such a quick intellect, and I love his delivery. I watched him do I almost call it a routine on one of the secret space program seminars. I think it was the one in San Mateo where he did a talk.
I uploaded that to the group I'm no longer in. I need to upload it to the one I'm still in.
That is such a great conversation that he has with the crowd, and he just you know, the way that people think, our mentalities, and how we shirk responsibility for the things that we don't understand. And I just love this routine that he talks about, you know, when people say, you know, well, what can we do? You know, you tell them, you know, be careful of this, the government's up to that. And the response that you always get from people, what can we do? You know? And it's just them shirking any responsibility, basically. You know, it's them saying, I don't know what to do. I have no idea what to do.
They basically, when I present the problem, they ask what I think the solution should be.
And then they argue your solution.
Yeah. Or they walk away shaking their head over how crazy they think I am.
Mm-hmm.
Because my solution is to disband the CIA.
I agree with that.
The CIA controls the drug trade. The CIA controls human trafficking. The CIA controls arms trade. It goes through, they took over from the Jesuits doing assassinations and coups. And in my personal opinion, they are the most evil agency on the planet. And disbanding them would be a great thing.
I agree. I have worked alongside people that have definitively had a rich history with that organization, and it blows my mind the audacity of tasks that they do. I mean, the stuff just listed, I mean, yes, they're doing all of those things. You know, those are extremely benign things that you just listed compared to the other things they do.
Yeah, well, I can.
Those sound terrible to the average.
I can prove they do those things.
Correct. Understood. Right.
I can't prove the less benign things.
Fair enough.
But
we actually came with the paperwork trail from Stargate.
The agency itself is pure evil. And when I've presented that in conferences, because I do have a presentation that I do in conferences on the declassified MK programs
Mm-hmm.
that are in use.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get to the end of it, people argue with me and
Mm-hmm.
tell me, oh, the CIA couldn't possibly be doing that. We would know about it.
But
Well,
they are doing it, and
there
you
are
don't know about it.
millions of TIs,
Yeah.
targeted individuals, all over the world, including in China, that are complaining of the very things
Yeah.
that I just talked about.
I've had people say that a million times, and it just makes me laugh because their ignorance is the answer, because they've just proved themselves wrong, because the program is happening and you didn't know about it.
Well, there's one program that I talk about in my presentation called Project Satan. And it is about
That's
taking,
Duncan's project.
yeah, it's Duncan's project. It's about taking the brain tracings of people who are in pain and overlaying it on your brain. You have no physical anything wrong with you other than this brain pattern is overlaid on yours. And people have literally died from the pain of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point of the program at his level was to see how long it would make a person take to kill themselves.
Yeah.
And that's talked about in the movie Total Control, which was what, 2004?
I have to see that one still. I haven't seen that one yet. You recommended it, but I haven't found it yet.
Okay, it's on IMBD, Amazon Prime.
We don't do Prime, but thank you.
I don't do the Prime itself, but when I did it, you could pay for just the movie.
Oh, okay. Like rent it off of there.
Yeah, rent the movie for 24 hours.
You got
And it was like
it.
$3, something like that.
I can afford that.
So,
Donald Trump just keeps sending money to my house now, so
I haven't gotten that yet.
I got mine.
So it's a movie about a guy who wakes up one day and finds out it's real. And you go through, and the movie is even correct about how to block it.
Nice.
So what they do is they take those copper scrubbies and they open them up,
Mm-hmm.
and they use them to line a baseball cap.
Nice.
And I haven't done that. I have this instead. I don't know if you can see it. It's a nylon cap
Mm-hmm.
embedded with nickel,
Okay.
and it blocks the Wi-Fi, and I wear that when I'm not on camera.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't wear it to the doctor's office. I don't want him convinced I'm crazy.
I was thinking about getting. I remember when I would have to go do rounds in the ice cube neutrino detector.
Mm-hmm.
We have to put on these Faraday cage lab coats.
Yeah.
So the equipment was so sensitive. Certain areas that I would have to go into, I'd have to don that gear and stay a certain distance away from the equipment racks.
There's something similar to that they have in Nevada at the little alien that's near Area
I've seen
51.
signs for that.
They've got this cage thing, and inside it they've got a radiation detector. And I don't know what I got going on, but when I walked past that, the radiation went way up.
Nice.
The guys I was with were teasing me terribly about it.
I had only just recently heard, this was news to me, that somebody was suggesting to me that a human can hold a higher Gauss reading, that can actually be increased and manipulated. I didn't know that.
The MER bloodline has a higher Gauss reading.
Interesting. So, because I was discussing I had a very similar thing to something that I've heard you say you still have, I believe. But way back when computers kind of first came out, I used to joke around and say that I was a technological jinx. Because anytime I was near someone's computer, it just didn't work. And I would laugh, and, you know, but eventually it went away. So I almost feel like computers had to get used to me, you know. I don't want to get into all of that, but
Yeah, I have trouble with wristwatches.
mm-hmm.
They either stop working or they only work when they're on me.
Okay.
And back in the day, oh gee, even the computer monitors that were just before the LED ones,
Mm-hmm.
I could degauss them with my hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was at first it scared my father, and then he realized he didn't have to pay the degausser to come out anymore.
Nice.
But yeah, he got
Yes,
mad.
I'd only just learned about this, so now it intrigues me because now I need to like find whatever the device is to measure or something like that, because it just made me wonder. I'm like, I wonder if I have a higher level.
MER bloodline also tend to glow. Especially if they're from one of the more inbred lines where they're more MER. You can be in soft light, like dusk outside, and there will be a visible light come off you.
Okay. And what you're referencing, would this be similar to or different than what people are talking about as the auric field?
This is from the cells making more ATP.
Okay.
This is a biological thing. It's not a spirit thing.
Okay.
This would be
Material thing, not an energetic thing.
It's your cells are hardwired to a higher level of ATP, and
And what is ATP?
I forget what it stands for.
Okay,
But
I'll just yield to not knowing.
It is the power plant of the cell. It's what your cell metabolism actually burns.
Okay.
And you can look it up on Google. ATP is the proper name for it. And I don't know of anybody that actually remembers the long version. That normals, and that's what I call people, normals, is it will be at one level, and people with, say, muscle damage, it will be a little higher. And then MER, it's a lot higher. A lot higher. And this is because the theory goes that the MER line is descended from the Nephilim.
Okay.
And so we actually have more ET DNA than the average human. If you go by the Sumerian tablets or even the Egyptian temple texts, humanity was a hybrid race created by a specific ET race that most people call them Anunnaki. They call themselves Zha.a.mi. And there was one line that was chosen to become kingship over the rest of us. And they were bred back to this race. So at one point, they were like 75% Zha.a.mi. And that was about, from what I can tell, it was about 20,000 years ago. But this one line has been interbreeding to not lose that
Mm.
ever since. And that's the MER bloodline is descended from them.
Mm.
One of many. We're not exclusive in that way, but
Mm.
there are other bloodlines also descended from them, and they are basically in competition for kingship, or who's going to run the world.
Mm.
And that's behind a lot of the shit that goes on that normals are dealing with and don't understand what's happening. What it actually is rivals for the throne.
Yeah, it's just turf wars. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just straight up, it's just street gang thuggery on a street level that most people aren't familiar with.
exactly. And the deeper I dig into it, the more it becomes that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at this and I'm listening to people who are at the early stages of understanding it, and they're scared, and they're trying to lump everybody in together as all the same, and they're not.
No.
These 30 groups that are arguing over who's going to be boss.
Mm-hmm.
From what I can tell, 5 of them are actually good guys from my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not doing the shit that all of these people are blaming on them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just sitting back trying to protect their own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not really involved in the turf war, except everybody else is targeting them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh shit, they're sitting there being quiet. We got to go zap them. You know, I'm like,
Trying to be Switzerland over there.
yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
job. You
Yeah,
know,
well, but that happens in time too. I mean, history shows us that that presents itself as well when there's a time where it's like, whether you agree with it or not, that other people will certainly suggest it's time to pick sides.
mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes whether you agree with it or not, sometimes people do push you to pick a side. I mean, there's times in history we see that, and you know, world.
Well,
Sure.
me personally, if somebody's pushing me to pick a side, I'm going to go with whoever they're mad at.
I understand. Yep.
That's just me.
Yeah, because that is already your problem.
That person wants to be my problem, so therefore their
Yeah,
enemy is my friend.
I hear you. Totally hear you. Yep.
And a lot of people don't understand that when they start pushing me, well, so and so, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, gone.
Yep.
So no, if you want me to make a decision, you tell me. I need you to decide which side of the fence you're on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't tell me who I'm supposed to be going with
Yeah, there's a lot
or
of that
why, because
nowadays.
I will sit there and gather all the information I can, good, bad, stupid, ignorant, whatever. And I'll wade through it and I'll toss anything that's just propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
And then the stuff that's left, I will sift through to find out as close to objective truth as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will compare that to my personal ethics and decide what I want to go with.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that once you toss all the propaganda out, that you're generally left with a history that tells both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And that the truth is usually in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is 100% evil or 100% good. And if they're presenting themselves that way, they're lying to you,
Correct.
or they're lying to themselves, which could be worse.
You kind of just brought this right back to something that I had taken a note on earlier, way earlier actually, but it's almost perfect that you brought this right back. And I want to You said something earlier that I want to touch on, but I can respect if it's something that you don't want to expand upon.
Okay.
But you had said when I had asked you about the questioning and how you were questioned about the black goo, and I had asked you if you knew if they had done it to other people. Your response was, well, they never asked me to do it for them, meaning that they would have asked you to make the explanation to someone else, correct? So
I
that
was not in the,
you were
yes, I was not in the department that did it. So I
right.
don't have firsthand knowledge.
Understood. But so now what I'm getting at is you have an understanding of the program. Would it be a stretch for me to take what you said to give an understanding that in these programs, they would use other children to try to promote other children to get in line with the program?
The program that I was in, I was basically kept in solitary for 5 years.
Understood.
When I was allowed out of my cage, I was not allowed to interact with others. I was to interact with the person doing whatever structured event was happening that day. It was, there were times that I was locked inside a vault with other children and we were left to suffocate. These were not bonding situations. This was
I
just,
understand that.
this was to make sure we would not support each other.
Understood.
So in that, this was what I dealt with in the CIA at Langley. It was, there was no affection given. I was a test subject. I still have issues because of this time.
I understand that 100%, and that's why I don't want to press you on this in the slightest. I'm having trouble listening to it. So we don't have to.
I still have issues with the concept that they actually verbally instilled in me that no one could care about me.
Understood.
And that explains a lot of the shit that I pull is in my core, I really don't believe anybody cares about me.
Understood.
And they're responsible for that.
Correct.
And
really unfortunate.
And I can't seem to overcome that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, intellectually, I know people care about me, especially Lou.
Yep.
But my heart doesn't accept it.
It's an absorption issue.
Yeah.
You can see it about you, but the absorption of it is challenging.
Yeah. And this is 60 years later after they did, well, no. They took me at 4 and I went down that line with them for 55 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back to age 4 and it's 60 years since.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, what, 115 years since they did this to me? And as far as my experience, so it's been ongoing that long. And in every altar, this is a primary thing they did to me before they split anything else off. So all of the parts of me believe this. And I've had people who have served with more than one altar all come up with, well, this is what you always said. And this is the core of it, was this is what they instilled in me in Langley.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had people tell me, based on their regression hypnosis, some of them that I saved them as children, that some of them that I killed people to save them as children. Some of them I was their drill instructor, and they're scared to death of me, even as me, as disabled and 64 years old. There are people that I've been on their combat team, and one of them said, how was it he put it? That I was rough as hell, but he wouldn't have anybody else have his six.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently I have no finesse. So I have no idea what they do to recruit outside of the way I was. And that was, I had gone through Shula, regular Shula, and I was starting my training program to become a fighter pilot and know what I had to know to be military on Mars. And at the beginning of that, they offered me the opportunity to have black goo. Up to that point, it was never even a consideration.
Mm-hmm. I think the reason that I was, I guess, inquiring in this angle, because part of what I'm trying to accomplish for the community is to help folks heal, to help them have closure for their experiences. And obviously, as you mentioned, there is some seriously traumatic experiences for what you explained in the training rooms or challenge rooms, whatever people want to call them. But I guess what I was getting at was more the interactions that would occur in between being in those rooms. And that what I'm finding a lot of is that these programs, like progressive, right? So a certain class of students might come in and get to a certain level, but then those students might be obligated to handle the next classes coming up through the ranks.
That happened in Shula.
Okay.
Because, we were sent by class, and we were the survivors of Langley. So
Right.
whoever survived, and in my group, 80% of us died the first year.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got all these kids are dying off. So out of the thousands of kids that they brought in, I think there were 20 of us that made it to Mars. Everybody else died.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next year, there were a few more because they got in trouble for losing that many.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? How was it Randy Kramer put it? A tremendous loss of prime assets.
Sounds typical.
Yeah, I think that's how he worded it.
Mm-hmm.
We were in a conference together, and they put us on a panel, and he was born in the 80s and has a very different view of his program than mine. So, there's 20 years difference, almost 30 years difference, and it was a different program because he went DOD and was in the Space Marines, and I was in Nacht Waffen with the Space Germans. And so while he was on Mars, his unit answered to my unit. I flew air, where you bomb their enemies, air support. I flew air support for his crews. Now, I didn't know he was there. I never landed. I never met these people. I didn't speak English if I had landed. So I was in this high altitude thing, and I would swoop down, see the raptors or the mantids that he was fighting, and just bomb them. And then back to work. I was usually on runs where that I would find and take out raptor nests. And I would occasionally be told to pick up a mantid for questioning. And in between all of this, I was doing ghoul duty, which is why we were called Valkyries. Was because in the mythology, a Valkyrie would come in at the end of a battle, and she would take the heads of the valiant warriors to Valhalla, where they would be rebodied. That was my job. I was to find the remains, preferably heads, of any humans that were on Mars and dead, and bring them back to be regenerated. I don't know how many Mars native humans we brought back, because they tested the same as us. The computers could not tell the difference. So, yeah. Which tells a lot about the joint history of the two planets if you've got the same genetic race on both planets. And the raptors on Mars are the same as the underground raptors on Earth. And the mantids are not the same as the mantid empire, but are very much like the ones that the Hopi describe as the ant people who brought them underground. So yeah, there's a lot of connections between the two worlds. But
yeah.
That's getting off what you were supposed to
No
be talking about.
No worries. The inquiry back to the program and the progressiveness of it is mostly just because I'm trying to get folks to, I guess, come out of the shadows more, because I think a lot of people as children were put into circumstances that they didn't know better than or have any control of. And I think a lot of guilt, shame, remorse, a lot of negative things around that. And I guess I'm trying to promote in the group is solidarity, and that everybody understands, that they can speak their mind and not necessarily get judged. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people in these programs that were doing negative things to children technically. But if we don't get people to talk about these things, and if we can't get people to accept that these people weren't necessarily doing things of their own free will and accord, and most likely under duress, I guess if we can't give them the amnesty of freedom of speech, then we're not really going to learn much.
Pretty much. The group that I'm operating now, I've had it for a while, but I was cherry picking people from the big group, the ones that I felt were real and past the is this a dream stage, and some from the ET experiencer community that I brought in, because the founding admin of the big group was very against the Zha.a.mi being real. And so I took those people to my group. And so you have a cluster of people with real ET experience with the folks that were supposedly created us. And you've got people with real ET experience with probably a half dozen other races. And you've got those mixing with SSP and super soldiers. And those are different communities because the super soldiers were generally used by either Kruger or Monarch.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in mercenary situations, and they were hyped up on drugs or black goo or both, and super modified to the point that these two groups are where the Borg in Star Trek came from. You've got people that don't even look human anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they come back, and those are the folks that tend to glorify the military side. Oh, yes, gung ho, we did this and we did that, and yes, we were awesome, and oh, what glory in battle, and we stomped their asses. And I'm sitting there, having been in Nacht Waffen, and I'm looking at this. We didn't ever glorify destruction of a race. We did it because it had to be done. It was part of our contract with the Draco so that we would have our colonies that overlap the Draco Empire. It was our rent for having those planets, was that we had to assist them in putting down rebellion. But we understood their motive for rebelling was they simply wanted to be free. We understood that because that was why we left Earth. We wanted to be free of the Jesuits and the bankers and everybody else that was trying to genocide the Germans. And I know that's a side of the story that is not told in America.
Understood.
So this is from the perspective of the Germans in space.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally have never seen a genocide that I approved of.
Right.
By anybody, to anybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, live and let live seems to be kind of a universal thing.
So, this penny here, sitting here, says no genocide is ever acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Penny in space, Lieutenant Penelope Valkylien, participated in more than one, under orders from the Draco.
You probably schnelled your way all the way through it.
When we would come up against an EMF field that was blocking our missiles, I was who psychically guided the missile in through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have personally destroyed worlds as a Nacht Waffen officer. But it was under orders because these people were in total rebellion, and that's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for us to keep our colonies, we had to enforce the rules. Now, these people knew what the rules were, and the Draco would go through and conduct negotiations for literally years before they would tell us to come in. And they would tell us whether they wanted the people to live or not. And people is used very loosely because some of these were insectoid races and some were other forms that we don't have even anything similar on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But they had decided they no longer wanted to be part of the Empire. And that's not acceptable to the Draco. Now, I know a lot of people think that the Draco are who have enslaved humans. And that's not true. It's the Zha.a.mi. They created us to be a slave race. Even your Bible says that you were created to serve God.
It's a great question. I mean, everybody's always like, who is God? I mean,
Who is God? God is a Zha.a.mi.
It's a very hot topic. And I have even postulated to, there are massive adherents to the Bible that take it, verbatim, literally as spoken. And I have tried to, put out there to some folks to consider that, the idea of this book being falsified, it doesn't mean that your God is not real. It just means that somebody's trying to mislead you is all. And you should actually then be working harder to reconnect with your creator. I mean, I'm not trying to tell anybody they don't have a God or a creator. I would never do that. But
The Zha.a.mi,
that same book tells them to be careful of the word getting confused on them.
yeah, it does. The Zha.a.mi have a being that they worship that they call the creator of all that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recommend that anyone who really wants to worship God, worship that.
I normally tell folks that are big fans of the Bible to read Matthew and the story of the sower and the seed, where Jesus Christ himself explains that there's two different versions of the truth. And if you're in the majority, you're on the wrong team.
Yeah. My understanding of who is God is more of a thing where there were more than one Zha.a.mi royal that was on Earth, and they each got their own collection of slaves, and the skin colors were to tell who you belonged to.
Mm-hmm.
It had absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the individual.
Mm-hmm.
It was so they could tell at a glance whose you were.
Fair enough.
And that each of these beings had their own rules for their own people. And that over the centuries, it was about 3,000 years ago, that most of them went home. And I say most of them because there is still a bunch of them here. They're just hiding because the nitrogen in our atmosphere weakens them. So their physical selves are getting a little peaked. But there are a few of them still here, and they are still running things behind the scenes, and that group is paying the taxes for Earth to the Draco. And as long as the taxes are paid and nobody gives the Draco shit, we're fine. You might see one or two of them once in a while. They did have a base in Antarctica. I'm not sure if it's still there or not. But to my knowledge, they were never here in large enough numbers to worry about them. And it's the Zha.a.mi that have been running things. And that is confirmed with A.R. Borden's books. And he was in charge of the Labyrinth group that interacted with the Cordium, which is a group of ETs that gives the NSA advanced tech that they turn over to companies like Raytheon. So
this is a name that I had to ask you about that I'm not that familiar with, and I have not looked into this name that much since you brought it up. This gentleman, was he affiliated with alphabet agencies way back when?
oh yeah,
Borden? Okay.
That's not his real name.
Fair enough.
He used a pen name to write his books.
Okay.
In a lot of literature with the Wingmakers, he's known as 15.
Oh.
Same person.
10-4.
So we do not have a real name for him, to my knowledge.
Interesting.
And he was supposed to have died several years back from cancer. When I read his books, I made telepathic contact with him, and he was rather pissed it was me and not the people he had worked with. And the people that he had worked with were very angry that I came up with this. How dare I say that their friend and family member, they had basically become family, and that their friend and family member had faked his death. So I'm in a lot of trouble with them for that. But that there again, we're talking those experiences that people don't want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. And I mean, that's almost the reason why you and I became friends, because I just got fed up with having so many cumulative events that I couldn't explain, that it was just like, I can't be nuts. I mean, literally all of these things happen. So I need to start talking to the same people, start talking to people with the same experiences.
well, I work very hard at staying grounded in 3D reality.
Same here.
And I do have a lot of what normals would call psychic experiences, interactions with beings that are not physical.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had since I was returned at age 4.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would talk about these things as a child, my father would beat me for lying.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very good at not telling people what I experience.
Yeah, because you become very adept at people's responses.
Yeah,
Responses.
the first inkling that this is outside of what they can deal with, and I'll shut it down. They
Mm-hmm.
won't hear another word from me about it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I was talking to my girlfriend this morning, and we just got onto the topic of, when I was a kid, I would, forge a signature or something on something that came home from school, and knowing the difference of responses, right? And
Mhm.
I had said to her that I had never ever forged my father's signature. I was never that stupid. Because I knew the response on that was not acceptable, worth the risk.
We would go into a school district, and Mom would sign us up. And she had dark hair and light skin and blue eyes and looked very French looking. She was very pretty and very young to have that many kids, the ages we were. And she had been 16 when she got married. And my father was half Cherokee. And he was very dark hair, dark skin, gray eyes.
Hmm.
Very handsome man. He looked a lot like David Jansen, the actor.
I don't know him, Penny.
He, okay, you'll have to look him up.
I will. Sorry.
But
What was he in? What was David Jansen in?
it was a movie about a man that was running from a criminal charge of killing his wife that he didn't do.
Oh, that
Yeah,
was they did a remake on it with
yeah. They redid
Han
the
Solo
movie.
was in it.
Yeah, they did a remake with several famous actors
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Raiders of the Lost Ark guy.
yeah,
We're
I
both
know.
words.
And I can't think of their names either.
Good for it.
Any of them, I can see their faces, can't think of their names.
Luke's just sitting there laughing at us.
Yeah, he is.
No
Lou's
help.
sitting
No
there
help. Can't
laughing.
phone a friend.
So yeah, he's used to me having aphasia.
Right.
So
I get it too.
but yeah, it's like, okay,
So I'll have to look him up apparently.
you'll have to look him up. Yes, it was a great show, and we used to watch it every week. And I told my mom, he sure looks like Dad, and she says, yeah, he does, and giggled.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Dad would show up, and suddenly this blonde, blue-eyed, well, my eyes are blue-green, but this blonde, blue-eyed, pale-skinned kid was suddenly seen as mixed race instead of white.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would do anything to keep Dad from having to come down to the school because we moved a lot. So as long as they didn't know my dad was Cherokee, I was treated well. As soon as they knew my dad, well, they thought he was Mexican, but as soon as they knew that he wasn't white, then I was treated like the Braceros kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I became very aware of how the races were treated. And yeah, I do identify with the Braceros kids to this day because that's where I would be classed once they figured out that I wasn't purebred.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not purebred anything. I,
Yeah, you're pretty good.
I'm a mutt, but
Uh-huh.
I am MER on both my parents' sides.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm that. As far as the agencies are concerned, that's what I am. And the Cherokee just enhanced it because they're another high metagene group.
Mm-hmm. There is, I gather there's something to the German bloodlines in some capacity from
Mm-hmm.
what I'm tracking as well. And granted, I know I have a higher percentage, I guess, than the average person, but I'm still a mutt myself.
Okay. All of the German tribes who came in between 100 BC and 400 AD, all of those tribes that came through, the Franks, the Goths, all of the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns, all of those were Scythian tribes.
Okay.
Okay, we don't hear a lot about Scythia in America,
No.
but Scythia was a major player during the time of Greece. Okay, before classical Greece, they were a major player in that time frame, and the Greeks in Athens talked about the Scythians, and the Scythians interbred with the Spartans on a regular basis because they were similar peoples as far as their martial abilities and their values, and they saw each other as equals. And they had come out of the area that's now Ukraine, and they had gone as far east as north of the Himalayas, north of India. So they had a huge range there. And their ruling class became the kings of everything west of the Urals during that time period. So they originally started off in the area just north of the Himalaya mountain range, and they were the source of the Aryans who came through India, and they were the source of the red-haired Jewish people and the Hyksos kings of Egypt. So they were masters of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who the Germans and the MER bloodline are descended from.
And I believe I've heard you say in the past that Nacht Waffen, at the very least, favors the German bloodline, correct? Or it's prerequisite?
They don't trust Americans because of how the Americans behaved at the end of World War II.
Okay.
And I don't want to go into that because if this gets posted on Facebook, they'll ban me again over that.
Fair enough.
there are some things I'm not allowed to say. There are consequences. But the Germans in space know about what happened at the end of World War II, and they're pissed as hell about it. And they extended an olive branch after they beat them at the operation of high jump.
Mm-hmm.
And the Americans have continued the propaganda that the German people are evil in and of themselves, which is bullshit. And nobody is evil in and of themselves.
Right. You can't paint with that broad of a brush on any group. There's good in individuals, there's good and bad in groups.
Exactly. And no, not even a single individual is completely bad.
Right.
Although some of them have lost touch with any compassion at all.
People can lose their way for any determined period of time, and people can change at any moment.
Yeah, it just takes the right trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But they prefer that all of their higher officers be at least a quarter German.
Okay.
And not born in the United States.
Okay.
Now, I have been as high as a commander, even though I'm not German.
Right. What you mentioned was preferences.
They reward productivity. They reward loyalty. They reward abilities that they don't have. But they have issues with how many of us were sent to them what they felt was contaminated with Draco DNA.
Got you.
And they, even though they are aware that that contamination made us more psychic and therefore actually more useful to them, they torment us about it. They call us Missgeburt, which is abortion that lived. And that's on a good day. And I've been ordered to do things that they would never have asked of a German woman. And they would not even have, it would not have even entered their minds to ask a German woman. So there is an amount of punishment for us because the CIA shot us up with Draco. And their military code is not set up to accommodate there are certain things that the people shot up with Draco have. Okay, we have a higher honor code. We demand loyalty, we demand to be treated with honor and respect, and if that's violated, we will defend our honor. That's normal and to be expected behavior. But when we do, we're punished for it because the German code doesn't allow a subordinate to defend themselves. So there are things like that. So most of the time I'm a lieutenant, because that's the lowest rank I can have and still do my job.
Okay.
And so basically every time I turn around, I'm back to a shaved tail. So that's what it is. It is what it is. And I have one commander in a mission I'm still on who tells me that I'm a Draco, I just look like a human. And he orders me to do some things that are actually pretty repulsive. and I have filed complaints with High Command about it. But having already returned from that mission, and that gap you talked about in one of your videos, the timeline one, having already come back from that, I am well aware that High Command did absolutely nothing about it.
Mm.
So that's a 60-year mission that I'm 2 years into. So I have another 58 years of dealing with his hell.
I only just recently started to assess dates and things, and I know, people say to look for, 20-year moments and events and things like that. And I'm starting to wrap my head around that. I think I did a 20 and back that started in 84 and another one that started in 94. Seems
You
to
can be gone on more than one.
Yep.
I have 90 of them out right now.
Mm-hmm.
From fall of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all 60 and backs because Nacht Waffen uses your regular normal body.
Mm-hmm.
And they just age regress you to send you back.
Mm-hmm.
The other groups will install your consciousness into a clone body and then activate the altar they want. And I have been awake during this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really weird feeling to be in your body in one tank, see the clone body limp in another tank, and then feel dizzy for a few minutes, and then suddenly you're in the clone looking at your limp natural body. It's like, okay.
I think people are going to see in the not too distant future that how do I put it? This is where it gets challenging because we lack the vocabulary. That the interconnectedness of the consciousnesses, so to say, fractured, rented out in this clone, put over here to this project, so to say, but effectively that the intellect, the spirit, the fractured component, that in a way they're all separated.
Memory is separated.
I'm sorry, I just had an alarm going off, is what distracted me outside. It went off, I'm sorry. So the memories get fragmented, spread out, and alters are created. That we're going to see that this tech is utilizing something similar to how blockchain works.
Mm-hmm.
And that there is a connection, that it's almost fractal or holographic as well, that each piece is supporting a lot of the other, and there is sometimes misconnections, so to say.
The more they transfer me from my body into another body,
mm-hmm.
the more aware I am of that other body.
Mm-hmm.
And example, the altar that I called Starbuck, because she had that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die.
Mm-hmm.
And she would fight like that too. Didn't care. She was killed 3 times. Okay, so there were 2 separate times that they came and got my consciousness and installed it into another clone,
Mm-hmm.
and then called her up. And I was awake for both of them. So this was something I remembered. I, Penny, here and now, remembered this because they took me, installed me into another body,
Mm-hmm.
and then used the code words to call her up. So they take your entire consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and they call up the memory fracture that they want.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this coding was done while I was at Langley. So they sell your factions, your alters, to a faction in space, and they give them tissue samples so that they can make a body to put you in, and they can call you up as many times as they want, but they can only use that alter. But because of the nature of the consciousness is whole,
Mm-hmm.
but the memories are not.
Mm-hmm.
But since the memory is what makes you who you are, that person has a completely different identity. I have an alter that speaks a whole nother language and thinks it's male, and is an analyst for one of those factions out there. They feed that alter information, and it spits out a, this is what you should do about it, and is correct 98% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, Penny here and now has analyst capabilities, and I'm right about 80% of the time. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
That's something that I've seemed to notice in the programs, is that I've used the term processing.
mm-hmm.
I don't find myself to be of a high mental capacity. I don't have a lot of education or anything like that, but I've always felt that I've been able to process in the moment, at the time that something's going on. I'm a quick thinker, and what you're calling analyzing, it's just environmental and rapid response.
No, this is a more careful sifting. What I was talking
You're
about.
talking informational.
Informational. This is they've taken all the information they've collected,
Mm-hmm.
and they dump it on that altar.
Yep.
And give it about an hour, and it will sort through
Mm-hmm.
and come up with, these are the facts that are relevant, the rest of it's bullshit, and this is what you need to act on, and I recommend you do this.
Yeah.
And usually the I recommend you do this is the least harm to all parties involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is important when you're dealing with these agencies.
Yeah. Contracts and words can be very important. One of the things that I keyed in on with that, the human experiments consent form. Okay.
Yeah.
If you look at that, it's really interesting. Knowing the nefarious intentions of certain agencies, you can look that document left, right, and center, and you can find nothing in there that says, don't work on children.
That's because they work on children.
Correct, exactly. It says don't work on prisoners. It doesn't say don't work on children.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. It's a very specific instrument, and the legalese matters. So technically, that paperwork, an agent could take that paperwork, go work on a kid, and say, I had legal precedent. There's nothing in my mandate that prevents it.
Especially if the agent that's signing it on behalf of the child has agreed to it.
Yes, I believe there, if I remember correctly, on the slot, I mean, it had someone else's consent could be given. So obviously, if you are dealing with adults exclusively, you wouldn't even need that line on the form.
Yeah, you would. If it was someone in a mental institution, they're considered incompetent.
True.
And people with DID alters are sometimes in mental institutions.
Fair enough. I didn't think of it that way.
And while they're shooting you up with their chemical array, you can be in a hospital and still be able to perform psi abilities.
This is one of the things I have in my experience. I believe I might have mentioned it to someone once somewhere as an inquiry to see if they had a similar experience, and they said they had not. But the drugs thing with these programs, the thing that freaks me out in my experience was, I remember very specifically the first thing that happened when we showed up to the library and I sat down with the pretty girl was I would lean my head back and she would approach me, and I was given the same warning to make sure that I'd never got it on my uniform because it'll stain your uniform and you'll get in trouble, and or out them, I guess, for what's on your uniform. But they would give me eye drops and put something in my eyes before we started. And I remember that it happened fast. And I also remember that I always rushed when they would release us from the library. I always wanted to get out into the lobby as fast as possible because the light coming in the front lobby would be extremely yellow still for a while. And I didn't have a lot of time before whatever it was that they did would wear off and everything would go back to the standard color spectrum. And I just remember really liking that part. Like it was like, all right, we can go. I want to get out to the lobby really fast because I'm going to have, a couple more minutes before they're going to notice I'm back in class and before this stuff is going to wear off and it's cool.
One of Tony Rodriguez's videos, he talked about when he was first taken doing the mind control stuff, that they put drops in his eyes, but he didn't go into any further depth about it. He may not have.
I didn't catch him saying that, and a lot of his talented and gifted stuff sounds very similar to mine, and I wonder if he's done as much research into the Monroe Institute to make connections. Because Monroe Institute's all over that program and in the paperwork, and I've already looked into their program, and the recollections that I have of going through it are just dead on. I mean,
yeah,
I've gone into some of the binaural hypnotic stuff that I found that was original from way back when, and it blew my mind to hear it again. It was like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me.
Well, I ran across some of that stuff when I was in college.
The same verbatim guided speech.
Yeah, I ran across a bunch of that stuff when I was in college. But by that time, I'd already served my 55 and back, and I was coming back, and I was in, it was in the 80s. And during that time frame, we had President Reagan doing his Star Wars thing. And because I was already noted in several programs already, I don't know when they took me. Okay, so they were really good about the gap. But by 1984, I had already experienced being spun to prevent my my alters from reintegrating. That is a physical process that they use to prevent reintegration. And it also separates the hemispheres. And in 2008, when I had an MRI, the neurologist said that he could put his thumb between the two halves of my brain at that point. But I had had a stroke in 1984 in labor, which is why I forget words. I had aphasia. I had to learn how to talk all over again. I went into labor as a college level pre-med microbiology chemistry major, and I came out talking like second grade, so a 7-year-old. I could understand what people told me most of the time, but I couldn't talk at anywhere near the level I had before. And I had to spend several years relearning English, which is part of why I no longer have my mom's Oklahoma accent. But yeah, I had to work really, really hard.
Oh my God, I can imagine.
And part of the treatment process for the aphasia was that I had a quarterly CAT scan. And on the films from the CAT scan, they could see where my brain was separated, and they were calling it enlarged ventricles. And they were just completely dumbfounded. These were the neurology people at a.
You would think if they were enlarged, they'd be in closer proximity to each other.
No, the ventricles are the holes.
Oh, okay. I thought they were referring to your brain halves as that. That did seem a weird term.
The ventricles are the holes between the parts.
10-4.
Like your pineal gland sits inside the third ventricle.
10-4.
And mine was separated, and they couldn't explain it. And so they kept testing me because they expected me to go blind, which is what happens when you have hydrocephalus, which is what they were assuming it was. And this was a University of California hospital. And they were completely dumbfounded by it. But in '88, I had done starvation diet to lose weight and ended up passing out. And they tried to lift my driver's license for it. And so DMV, I guess it's called DOT elsewhere, decided to do electroencephalogram on me. And it was found that the right back quarter of my brain had a different pattern, like it was a different person. And so those are the two physical things that I have to prove that I've been fucked with.
I have some more inquiries to do, but it's funny because you're saying the encephalograms and stuff like that. During my elementary school years and the Monroe Institute Talented and Gifted programs, I mean, you know, it's in hindsight, I learned things that I didn't know was different, right? So apparently I had a lot more EEGs and EKGs than the average elementary school kid, that not everybody was apparently showing up to, you know, have these done with regularity.
That's not normal.
It's not normal to throw a kid on that for no known reason.
It's not normal for a kid to have those.
I would have those done regularly.
Most adults never have one.
I would have those done regularly as a kid, and now I'm seeing in the paperwork for these programs that those were the tools that they were using to check their work.
I'd like to see that form.
Oh, I have them.
Yeah, I'd like to see the link for that.
Yeah, they were using just what you said, the electroencephalograms, it's EEGs, EEG, and EKG devices being utilized. They were saying in these programs to test the outcomes of the work they were applying on the patients. I remember going to the doctor all the time and getting rigged up for these things and told don't move and we're going to try it this time here, and I was a punk kid, so I remember being on the table and not listening. I would wiggle my finger and they'd be like, stop moving your finger. I was testing them. They knew what was going on, but that's what would happen. You know, they'd be like, stay still. And I'd be sitting there wiggling my toe and they'd be like, can you stay stiller? And I'm like,
I would have had a hard time with that as a kid.
yeah.
One teacher actually forced my parents to take me to the doctor to check me for worms because I couldn't sit still.
So you obviously know more about these devices than I do, and you're saying that they're not something that would normally be used on a kid. Could you expand on that for me, since I apparently don't know this device that well?
They were expensive.
Hmm.
The folks that are trained to read them are expensive. This is not a normal device.
Okay.
It's not like taking your temperature and blood pressure.
Mhm.
They have to have a reason to justify using these things.
Fair enough. And my family was definitely not the Rockefellers, so I'm sure they weren't going out and trying to get all kinds of unneeded care for me. I can assure you that when I went to them and said that I was ill, I got the standard "get your butt to school" routine. So it's like I don't, you know.
With my father, if you were not running 101 or throwing up or stuck on the toilet with diarrhea, you went.
Totally understood. Yep, par for the course over here as well.
So,
Yeah, it's not like I was some ill child in any way, shape, or form that would have justified me having any kind of medical service provided.
I was abused as a child.
Mhm.
My father would start swinging and not be able to stop.
Mhm.
And um, by the time mom would finally stop him, I was usually unable to walk.
Mhm.
So I missed a lot of school. And
Mhm.
we moved a lot. And in hindsight, I think they were either hiding from the people who showed up to test me, or they were hiding from CPS. And
Mhm.
in my father's mind, they may have been the same people.
Mhm.
So he died in 1980 from heart disease. So he had quadruple bypass surgery and died before he ever came out.
Mhm.
So yeah, he was a violent person, and it was, you did not stand up to him, you didn't cross him, you did your best to be out of sight, out of mind. And he thought of us as his work crew, and he would put us on tasks. And I eventually got to the point where I got tired of him standing over me, and I would tell him, don't you have something better to do than to stand over me? I'll do your work. And I don't know why he got to where that he would leave me alone,
Mhm.
but he did. Um, I even cussed at him one day and got by with it. Shocked the hell out of me. um, I guess he knew I was right. Um, but he was a violent, strict man with a nasty temper.
Mhm.
And after I came back from my first mission, 55 and back, um, he was so abusive he created another 2 alters in me.
Mhm.
And I have commented that he was more efficient than the CIA because he didn't have to rape me to do it.
The personal connection's already there, so the affront, I guess, exists faster.
He locked me inside a closet with Black Widow spiders.
Right, but he's your dad, so it hurts more, I think. So,
Yeah, I was absolutely terrified I was going to die in there.
Mhm.
And he was going to keep me in there for 15 minutes after I shut up.
Mhm.
And I figured that I was going to be dead before I was out.
Mhm.
And not understanding that even the size I was, Black Widows took longer than an hour. But yeah, my terror of spiders from Mars
I wouldn't have enjoyed
fed,
that.
fed it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I couldn't get him convinced there were spiders in there. And finally, it was what? The third or fourth episode of him doing that, I finally showed Mom where the spiders were.
Mm-hmm.
But he had started doing that because my brother and I, who were unable to be what he wanted us to be,
Mm-hmm.
my brother and I had gotten to where we were sitting and shaking all the time. I mean, any school teacher that paid attention would have declared us abused.
Understood. Different times.
And Mom had told him, you know, the authorities are starting to watch these kids. You're going to have to do something besides beat them. So he started locking us in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
And I came out with an altar that could please him. And yeah, I have big gaps in my childhood after that.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was making sure we survived.
I've come to notice that my memories of my childhood are a very structured format of things that I can recall and things that I can't. And there's like no deviation.
Yeah. Anytime Dad went batshit,
They spread over an area. They cover my whole life, but it's very, you'll know this, you can connect this, and you will never in the in-between spaces.
Yeah. And I still have an altar that pops up about once a week. And she gives Lou hell. And he has told me that if she were a man, he'd punch her. That she's that nasty to him.
Now that would get you some YouTube subscriptions.
Probably, yeah.
This week on Lou Cleaning House.
Yeah. Breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe.
The new Lou channel.
Anyway, but yeah,
anyway,
it's those days.
If we can't laugh about these things, you know.
Yeah, I know. There was one whole weekend that was missing last month that I actually went through my messenger just to make sure that she hadn't done anything nasty to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I haven't caught her at it. She just gives Lou a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there was a whole weekend I have no memory of.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an ongoing thing for people who don't know.
Understood.
We don't get instantly healed just because we're sent back. And
right, if not the extreme opposite.
How do I put this politely? I can't. We are fucked up.
That's
on a good day, we're fucked up. And
I was explaining. Someone had reached out to me, and I was trying to write this to them in an email, and they were having trouble, and I was trying to help as best I can. And I said, you need to understand, like you just said, we're fucked up. We're the broken ones. You know, they're like, how can this be? And well, and I said, everything can fail. Everything anyone's ever designed, anything anybody's ever tried to create, there's always a certain percentage of failure. I said, you're not supposed to be remembering. You're not supposed to be going through this. This was not the plan. I said, there's plenty of other people out there that don't remember squat. That was the plan. I apologize to inform you that you're broken. I'm like, I hate to be the first one to tell you, but it's just news to you. The program broke you. It's just as simple as that.
Okay. I was broke before.
Fair enough.
But I didn't.
Figuratively to this person.
But I didn't understand what was wrong. I was still having the psi experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I was still interacting with beings that nobody else could see. The church that I was, you're Catholic. I was Episcopalian. I was a lay reader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like Lou said, Catholic light. I was a lay reader. You know what a lay reader is.
Yeah.
Okay? I was a postulant for holy orders.
Mm-hmm.
And I had altars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? My congregation considered me a prophet because I was channeling somebody who said he was Yeshua and knew the Bible better than I did. And I had been to seminary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, so there's been weird all along.
Yeah.
I would pray for stuff for people, and I'd get it 85% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
There's a lot of folks that are a lot better at manifesting than others.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, was I was manifesting.
Mm-hmm.
And once the NSA agent used my remember code, all that faith fell away like it was a used pair of underwear. It was gone.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having that faith. I just don't have it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the stuff that I did that they thought I was a prophet, I'm still doing it. It's just not pretending to be Jesus anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, this stuff has been ongoing my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't understand until the memories were activated. And even then I had this big lump of memories that were all in German and mostly violent. And I still haven't sorted them all out because I still don't speak German well enough.
What year was it that you had the NSA personnel do your remember code?
It was in April of 2013.
Okay, so in 2013 that occurred. So you were saying that until that occurred, you didn't have the recollections at all. So say the 6 months prior to this event, I guess I'm trying to imagine what Penny Bradley was like just prior to King Code. Like, so 6 months before that, you didn't know anything about this stuff. You didn't know anything about altars that your dad had created.
Oh, I knew I had the altars that my dad had created.
Oh, okay.
That I had lived with.
10-4.
I knew that my brain hemispheres were separated.
Gotcha. I guess that's what I was trying to discern, was what was remembered.
The medical stuff I knew.
Okay.
But I had no idea what had happened to create it.
10-4.
And I had been on an antidepressant for over a decade. And I had come off it after Thanksgiving 2012. So not even 6 months after I came off a decade of antidepressant, the NSA gives me back my memories. And it was just going from totally numb to wham. I stopped sleeping. I was lucid 24/7. You know, when you don't ever sleep, you think you're hallucinating. And
it's a very evil enemy.
I have not slept since my memories were activated unless I took something to make me sleep. And it's been a long time, and it's like my brain is burning itself. But I have most of the time I have a clarity that I never had before. And abilities skyrocketed. When I went to go into a shamanic trance and pull up altars for reintegration, it's like it takes me under 5 minutes to get there. Some of these things that mystics talk about, it takes days to get to, I'm getting there in under 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And Lou is a shaman, and he will go into trance with me, and we're not using drugs to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? There are no entheogens involved, but he will go with me because sometimes other spirits will try to present themselves to me as my alters.
Mm-hmm.
And he has chased off more than one.
Mm-hmm.
But he's there to make sure that the ones that I accept are actually me.
Mm-hmm.
And then starts the process of merging the two personalities back together. And my guidance has been that Penny, here and now, is the only one of my alters with an ethical compass. And so Penny, here and now, has to stay dominant.
Mm-hmm.
Because the others don't know right from wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty important thing.
It's helpful.
Well, it's not like the CIA was going to teach them right from wrong.
No, they were going to probably break them of that moral compass.
Exactly. So this has been a very long ride. I have reintegrated 30 altars.
Mm-hmm.
And in June 2018, I was picked up by the Zha.a.mi, and I was informed that I was an abomination and put in, well, I woke up inside a machine that they call the truth machine, translated into English. I was hearing them telepathically, so I heard English. I didn't hear their language. I don't know what they call it. But I was inside the truth machine, and they had me in my spirit form. And they were stripping off altars and destroying them.
Hmm.
They had a way to record all the memories of that altar, and they were doing that. And after the second one, Nacht Waffen showed up to rescue me.
Hmm.
And that made me have to rethink Nacht Waffen. Because up to that point, I had sort of accepted the propaganda about them. You know, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm a lieutenant that's always in trouble.
But you're theirs.
Why the hell would they go to that kind of trouble to attack a superior force to rescue me? And they lost a ship during the process. How the hell was I worth losing a ship? I know how they think in space.
Mm-hmm.
There had to be value to me in their eyes. And
It seems to me almost like, in a way, like Nacht Waffen almost seems to me like kind of almost how the mafia works. And it has to do with like respect and honor, so to say. And that I'm surmising, because you're saying like, well, why did this happen? Maybe it had way more to do with some sort of honor circumstance. That loss of a ship isn't necessary. I mean, sometimes you lose equipment. I mean, I get a ship's a really important thing. I get that. But
a ship full of crew.
Totally understood. But assuming that they're similar to the mafia, which I don't know is true, I would not put it past a mafia-style organization to risk a lot of things for their honor.
Okay.
And maybe something to do with you in that exchange. I mean, certainly you have value, but I don't know this whole story at all. So I'm just postulating that maybe something was going on that, yes, you were so important in the equation that maybe they needed to honor. It's almost like a respect thing. Like you're still theirs regardless.
Oh yeah, they
The
still
mafia is very much
after
like
that
that.
they pulled me for 90 altars.
Right. I
Wow.
mean, so now here's the payback. You know, we risked a ship for you. So yes, we might have lost it. We upheld our honor, but guess what? You owe us 90 in backs because guess what? You owe us
90, 60 in backs.
60 in backs.
Yeah. As fleet navigator.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
So
put a value on anything, and I guess theoretically, if time never ends and they can just keep getting you to re-ante up to pay what they presume is a debt, I mean, I'd hate to be in that equation myself.
well it's
But it sounds mafia-like.
I have felt completely exhausted since
Mm-hmm.
they took me for the 90 trips.
Mm-hmm.
Completely drained. It's
Mm-hmm.
been just like, oh. So they are getting their service worth. What, they're getting what they put out. But it was still the impression that I have is that the Zha.a.mi intended to destroy me as a soul
Mm-hmm.
so that I could not reincarnate. And that for whatever reason, Nacht Waffen decided they needed me and came back in time and stopped the process. And I have since then, I know one of the people who abducts me for the Germans. I know her real world. We have talked more than once. And she told me one day, because I was like dumbfounded, this was all I could talk about right afterwards, that I was completely dumbfounded. And she told me, she says, Penny, my commander told me that you will never be allowed to die. That if you are dead, that they will travel back in time and get you, and if necessary, take you to Mars and keep you there. I'm like, immortally a slave, immortally theirs. And I'm like screaming, no!
Yeah, does not sound appetizing to me in the slightest.
It's like, no.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do I get to be me?
Correct. I mean, and even if you weren't a slave, even if it was, at what rate do you get your life back if the servitude is still indefinite?
Yeah. So I don't think they care.
No.
There's apparently something I do there that I'm not aware of as Penny that
And it seems to
matters.
me that conning people into contracts seems to be like this really cool intergalactic pastime.
That seems to be a thing out there that a lot of races do.
It seems pretty prevalent from what I'm listening to from everybody is that it's, hey, if we can trick you into something, that's totally legit.
Yeah, my understanding was that all the contracts were supposed to be done in October 2017. All that was a reset. So all the shit since then has been all these agencies and beings trying to reset.
Mm.
They've been trying to re-up everybody. And yeah, I'm not going to talk about how I know that.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm.
That came through Zha.a.mi. So there was a reset for the solar system, that all the contracts were complete. That was like a jubilee period where slavery was ended, blah, 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 blah. And so it was what has been reinstated since then, they can zap you with, and nothing from before that.
Mm.
So it's galactic legalities.
And loopholes.
Yeah. People think that the age of Pisces ended in 2012. It didn't. It ended in 2017.
Okay.
And
Switch to Aquarius at that point, you're saying?
yeah, we switched to Aquarius at that point, and there's like a 10-year changeover period.
Okay. Transition.
And we're in that now, according to the Zha.a.mi. So there are 2 of them that still speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the impression that they think I'm armed and dangerous, and that they're monitoring me rather than being friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the relationship I have with them. It's almost like a probation officer checking on me.
Mm-hmm. That's funny.
Yeah, but it's still irritating.
Yeah, fair enough. Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to figure out what had happened to me, and it was okay.
So now, prior to...
You know, we've been at this for almost 3 hours.
Really? 10-4 penny. There's always another time.
Yeah. Oh, I love talking with you. I could talk to you for days.
Oh, that's funny. No, I totally understand, and I don't want to keep you forever.
It's when it gets to 3 hours, it takes a while for it to upload.
Totally understood, and I had no idea. I thought we were talking for like an hour. Holy cow. You might have to edit this. People are going to go nuts.
It's okay. Let them listen for 3 hours.
There you go. Let them listen. No, but that was great, Penny. I had a really great chat, as always, with you. I look forward to it. I have I made a couple more connections there in my head, so thank you.
You're welcome.
You're leaving me with more questions, so that's fantastic. So we have another reason to communicate.
Sure. Well, besides that we're friends and I like you.
Oh, that's always a plus too. But I mean, we have a reason to communicate in front of other folks is always a plus too. But I think I might actually want to talk to you on the side about some stuff as well. But anyway, I always look forward to talking to you. And tell Lou I said hello, and make sure you take good care of the cat. And I look forward to talking to you again, Penny.
Okay.